Shalom, shalom. It's your brother Danar back with brother Azrael. It is Friday, the second lesson of the week. Um, First and foremost, we want to give all honor and glory to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We do so by way of His only begotten Son, who is an instrument of salvation for the nation of Israel. Today is going to be a short lesson, man. And just to give a little bit of insight on some duties of a husband slash father, right? It's entitled Husbands, Your Service is to Lead. Um, as husbands, as wives, we have certain roles and stuff like that. I think, um, we're going to play a short little video. But I was kind of agreeing with what he was going over in the video. And I think that that can be what's about to be talked about can be a hiccup, especially in your early years of marriage. We come from a culture where it's happy wife, happy life, right? And uh, for some time now, that's how men have been living. But we see the most successful relationships is when everybody is operating as they should. And so the question on the table is, man, how are men, how are husbands supposed to be of service to their wives, right? How are they even supposed to be of service to their kids, right? Are they supposed to be at their every beck and call, right? What does that service look like, right? Does it look like, you know, uh, cutting the grass, coming in and you know folding clothes and doing things of that nature, right? What is this service that a husband should be doing? You know what I'm saying? And of course, we know that at the end of the day, as the Torah leads us to believe, right? As the Torah leads us to believe, um, a husband is obligated to do a few things. One of which is to provide clothes, food, a place to stay, of course, in your duty of marriage, right? I think we all know what that is. But we're just going to dive into what or how a husband serves his family. You know what I'm saying? And what that looks like. I'm gonna play this video and then we'll get into it. Again, let me know if you can hear the video clearly. Right.
Called husbands not to primarily lead through serving, but to serve through leading.
Wow.
So you're serving your wife by leading your wife. And the phrase servant leadership, what I'm seeing is guys use it as an excuse not to lead. I'm just going to be a doormat and I'm going to do the dishes and I'm going to make sure she gets her nails done and make sure it's like, no. You serve her by leading. Right. So even when Jesus took a crown of thorns, he was doing it to go to the cross, to sacrificially give up his life, to then victoriously take it up again on the third day, so that he might what? Lead his bride out of her foolish, rebellious, sinful unrighteousness and into the glory of the inheritance he purchased for her. So his act of service was done as an expression of his leadership.
Right. I saw that earlier this week, man. And I thought it was kind of profound, man. The comment that he made or statement that he made was that husbands are not to lead by serving, but they are to serve by their leadership, right? They are to serve by their leadership. And that's something that I think I kind of resonated with, right? And we kind of see it throughout the scriptures. I'm gonna pull up. Let's get into some precepts really quick.
For example, too, for people that join the military, whatever rank you may be, right? There's some officer ranks, right, that take on leadership skills and have leadership responsibilities, right? Got to get it out. I say that to say this. When they go around telling people that they're veterans, they're telling people that they serve their country. How they serve their country? By leadership, right? They were able to lead a platoon. They were able to lead an attack. They were able to lead. That leadership was them serving, right? So that's an example of serving and leadership.
Right, that's a good example, right? A couple things come to my mind, right? I had a conversation with my wife a few months back, right? And I was just kind of paralleling a marriage to to coaching, right? Or a sports team. In a sports team, of course, you got the team, right? Of course, you got like ball boys and water boys, and what do they call those girls that used to help out on the team and stuff like that?
Managers.
I guess managers at a low level managers on the team, right? Go around with the clipboards and stuff like that, pass out towels. But then you also have the coaching staff, right? And you have one head coach, and then you got some either one assistant coach or multiple assistant coaches. But I paralleled it to say, hey, look, man, this is especially when you have kids. This is our sports team. There's one head coach and there's an assistant coach. The assistant coach is very important. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, the trajectory of the team is led by the head coach, and he has typically has the last say so, right? That's not to say that he doesn't take advice from his assistant coaches. It doesn't say that he doesn't let them have the reins from time to time, right? But ultimately, it is his show. And ultimately, if all hell goes to break loose, he's getting the backlash for it. Why? Because it's his responsibility to lead that team, right? And when you have responsibility, right, to lead or to be the leader, right, it comes with good and bad. So if your team is looking good, you get the credit. If your team is looking bad, you get the credit. Same thing for a marriage, right? If your marriage is looking bad, people are looking 9 times out of 10, whether you in this truth or in the world, they're looking at the husband. What is the husband doing? You know what I'm saying? Brothers always like to quote the that the scripture. I think it's in Sirach where it says, "An evil wife is a portion to an evil man." Right. So it's the same thing, right? So it's bittersweet, but if your marriage is doing good, typically they look at the man who is the head of the household, right? This is why you look at precepts that say stuff like you shouldn't be trying to lead a body like a church or something, right? If your house isn't in order, right? Because leadership has to be displayed, and you have to have a good track record, right? For instance, you're not gonna go out and get a good coaching job if your last coaching job is trash. You're not gonna be promoted from an assistant coach to a head coach, right? If you have a bad track record, right? You know what I'm saying? You're not gonna be if you're the head coach of the 9th grade team, you're not gonna get promoted to the head coach of the varsity if you lost all the games. You know what I'm saying? Same thing spiritually. You're not looked at to lead a larger body of folks if you can't even lead those that's within your household, right? And so another thing that comes to mind when the brother brought that up was just having a leadership role at your job in general, right? We see managers, supervisors, general GMs, CEOs. We see general foremans, regular foremans, right? And one thing that these people are there to do, right, is to serve by their leadership. What does that look like? Oftentimes, whoever hired that person will let them know, hey, look, I'm not paying you to work. I'm paying you to manage. I'm paying you to supervise. I'm paying you to problem solve, right? And so these are the things that's within those leadership roles, right? A lot of times you have some people that want to get, their hands dirty and start working. And what happens, they tend to get chewed out. Like, hey, what are you doing? Put that down. I'm not paying you to do that. I'm paying you, right, to be the mind of this operation. I'm paying you to manage these folks, right? And so when we look at that, we can kind of compare that and parallel that to a marriage in a sense, or just a father in general over his household, right? I'm gonna share my screen. Do you have something to say?
Yeah, we're gonna say, a lot of times you hear the phrase, "I'll take lead on that," right? That phrase in itself is somebody saying, "Hey, take a load off. I got it," right? I'll be the point man, right? So, and if you know what a point man is somebody that takes care of all the logistics, takes care of all of the things necessary for something to go smooth, right? They're taking the lead on it. So your friend groups or your family reunions or whatever, your church, your congregation, your camp, right, may have a point man for certain events, for certain feast days, that somebody might take lead on it. Now, just because they're leading on it, that doesn't mean that they're better than everybody else. It doesn't mean that um, nobody else has a say so. That doesn't mean that they're the only person that matters. No, they're just taking lead on it so that something is organized. They're taking lead on it so there's no confusion. They're taking lead on it so things are done decent and in order, right? So taking lead has a lot of responsibility, but it's also a service, because now that somebody's taking lead on it as being a point man or a point girl, the others don't have to worry about coming up with an itinerary, right? So they're serving in that aspect. The others don't have to worry about tallying up and doing the math on how much everything's going to cost, right? Because the point man or the point woman's doing it, right? They're serving in that aspect. The others don't have to worry about transportation, the point man's job. So a lot of times taking lead on something or being the point man on something, right, is service, because it's allowing others to not be bothered by it. For husbands, you'll see a lot of times husbands don't want to share with their family bad news, right? Unless they have to, right?
Or they'll share it once they have a solution for it.
Right, I was getting to that, right?
Oh,
So
that's lucky.
they'll wait to the very end to where they either find a solution like the brother just said, or they can have a train of thought and a plan to get out of it before they share bad news. Why? Because they don't need their kids and their wife and their family. They don't need their family stressed out, right? Because if their family's stressed out, that means they're not doing their job as a leader, right? So a lot comes with that leadership role, and also it services not only the physical, but it services the emotions. It services the spiritual aspect of things, right? So a lot comes with that leadership role, especially for husbands.
You got to know your personnel, right? And then knowing that in every aspect of leadership, there's things you relay and there's things that you don't. There's things you hold off on, and there's things that you proceed with, right? If you pick up what I'm putting down, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a manager, whether you're a head coach, a supervisor, whatever, there's always moments where you you kind of withhold information from certain individuals. Maybe that be your kids, right? In this scenario, as a husband or a father, or if you're on the job force, your employees, you kind of withholding information from them, right? Till you get more understanding on it. Things like that. You kind of withhold information from your assistant coach until for a fact that's the direction you want to go. Sometimes and women they don't really like this, right? And I can sympathize with them, but sometimes your husband will withhold information from you, right? But it's not within malice, right? You have to understand the mind of a man, and kind of like what we're going over. Men don't want to, cause their wives to panic. Men don't want to put a problem on the table without a go around or a plan. You know what I'm saying? Because the number one question that's going to happen after you relay this information to somebody, okay, is going to be, okay, where do we go from here? Right? The man wants to kind of already have that in motion before he puts everything on the table. And sometimes women, they don't really take, they kind of take that the wrong way, and I just want women to understand the mindset of a man with the association and parallelism to leadership in the world as CEOs, bosses,
Yeah, that's why.
supervisors, head coaches, stuff like that, right?
Right, and that's why I was emphasizing also the leading of emotions, because just like you said, even at a job, a CEO and all of them, they're not going to tell the base workers that the company is going bankrupt. They're not going to say that until they have to say it, because they don't want people to start looking for other jobs. They don't want people to start panicking, right? Same thing for a husband. We got to guard everybody's emotions in the family,
Right.
because next thing you know, you start telling in-laws, and they start telling people, then stuff
And
like.
spiritually, man, it's smart to do, because spiritually, we know that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of that is guarding, the spirits of those that you're leading, right? Making sure that they're in the best position to possess their own vessel.
Because men, we think logically, women think emotionally, right? So yes, we know what Donald just said. We know what the brother Donald just said, right? We wrestle not against flesh and blood, and yes, women do know we wrestle not against flesh and blood too. But sometimes their emotions override that, right? Now, the reason why we shouldn't prematurely say stuff, or the reason why we should lead the emotions of our house, is because even though men are logical thinkers, we are influenced by our wives. We see that with Adam and Eve, right? With Adam, he knew better, but he's still talking to his wife. His wife was allowed, his wife manipulated him to eat the same fruit. Also, we see with Ahab and Jezebel. Ahab was dealing with a dilemma with some other kings, and he wanted to buy some land, and they didn't want to give it to him. And he was about to just shrug it off, and then he went home, talked to his wife, and Jezebel was like, "Nah, you a king. Ain't nobody finna tell you no. You can have whatever you want." And she influenced him, made him do something that he shouldn't have done, and they were punished for that, right?
Even like Samson, right? When you look at Samson, we all read Samson's story, and we all think the same thing. Oh, this nigga was dumb. You know what I'm saying? Why would he tell her that? Right? Whether you're a man or a woman, we all had that same thought. Why would he tell her that? Right? Giving us that leads me to know that as a human being, man or woman, we know that there's certain things that you can tell and certain things that you probably should withhold.
Right, because a girl's emotions can definitely influence you, and now you'll be thinking irrational because you told her something too early, and now she's out of the spirit. She done convinced you to think about the situation a different way before you even had a plan of action.
Or you never know, like sometimes women, they be going through what they be going through, and if we just being real here, sometimes your wife ain't always on your side, right? Hey, sometimes your husband ain't always on your side too. You know what I'm saying? And ain't trying to go back and forth. It happens on both sides, but we know a marriage is never just perfect. But sometimes your wife ain't always on your side. Sometimes you can relay information to her at the wrong time to where she's not really feeling you in that era of y'all's marriage, right? And then her energy becomes bad. That energy becomes negative in the spirit, right? And then you end up in a situation like Samson, to where your power is taken from you, right? Your eyes getting gouged out, you know what I'm saying? And you found yourself in a bad predicament, right? So and so when you look at that, leadership, there's certain things and we're going to get into it, right? Once I bring up this precept. But oftentimes what happens is with leadership, when it is time to tell somebody something, they do it decently and in order, right? You probably get an email, or a fine written letter, right? That's respectful, is laying out everything, right? It's pretty much answering all the questions that you had, you know what I'm saying? And it's done in the right time, right? And so this is an aspect to think about. I want to bring this precept up real quick on the stage. And we're going to kind of get into, the proper examples here, right? This is Ephesians 5:25.
Book of Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 25. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it.
Right, man. So we are to love our wives as Christ loved the church. I bring this up because he is the greatest example of what it means to not necessarily lead by service, but to serve by his leadership, right? And so when we see this, Christ didn't go around telling everybody everything, right? Right? Christ loved the church, but he still spoke to them in parables. You see what I'm saying? And so but that when it was time to reveal his dark sayings and all that stuff, right? He did that as well, right? But he was very big on timing. That's one thing the Lord was very big on, was timing. You know what I'm saying? He was looked at as what? An austere man. He was looked at as the mighty counselor, right? Things like this. And so we're going to jump into some of the examples of Christ and how he served through his leadership, and how us husbands should be serving through our leadership, right? Real quick, though, I want to bring up this precept real quick. It's a classic, but I want to bring this up just on the contrary. It's just Isaiah 3:12.
Isaiah chapter 3 and verse 12. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy paths.
Right, man. And so, it says for my people, right? He's talking about the nation of Israel. He's not just talking about husbands. He's talking about the nation. And so what's going on with the nation? The children are their oppressors, and the women rule over them. Oftentimes, it's not really women trying to be dominant or women trying to be ruling over their husbands, but what it looks like is their emotions running rampant and the husband giving into them, right? And that turns into the man, instead of being a leader that he is, he goes into, instead of serving with his leadership, he goes into leading with servitude, right? And his servitude goes to the wife, and ultimately it goes to his children, and the whole order is out of whack, right? It says, "Oh my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err," talking about the women and the children, right? Because who's supposed to be leading here? The man is, right? And if the man is leading, it will not destroy the way of thy paths. Whose paths? The children of Israel. It would not destroy the children of Israel's paths, right? When you have proper leadership. So I just wanted to bring that out there, right? Just to piggyback on that, we're going to go to the book of Sirach, right? Before we get into some of these examples. Where is it at? Book of Ecclesiasticus. And we're going to go to, let's see, chapter 33 and 19.
The book of Sirach, chapter 33 and verse 19. Give not thy son and wife, thy brother and friend, power over thee while thou livest. And give not thy goods to another, lest it repent thee, and thou entreat for the same again.
Right. It says, give not thy son and wife, thy brother and a friend, power over thee while thou liveth, right? Putting emphasis on the son and wife, right? Because we're talking about leadership in your own homes, being a father and being a husband, right? It says, give not them power over thee as long as I live it. And I like the way it puts this, because it's not a light thing. And one thing I'll say, being married, man, especially if you're a compassionate brother, right? If you actually kind of do care about your wife and your kids, right? You'll find yourself in positions where you're not leading no more, and you're kind of giving in to the emotions of your kids or giving in to the emotions of your wives, right? And it's a tricky thing to catch yourself up on, right? Because what happens is the end of this verse, it says, and give not thy goods to another, lest it repent thee, and thou entreat for the same again. Pretty much saying, hey, unless you give your substance over, or your power, your authority over to another, right, and it repent thee, and you want it back, right? Because one thing about it, once you make something habitual, it's gonna stick. We tell brothers all the time when they first get married, right? We all know about the honeymoon stage and the Prince Charming stage, the cupcake stage. When you first get together and you're going above and beyond, right? The first 2 years, maybe, or first 1 year, you in the marriage, you doing you cutting the grass, you doing the dishes, you folding clothes, right? Baby, don't worry about it, I got it, you know. And what happens is you're doing that to be nice and to help out, but you gas out because you start to, and I just named a couple things, right? But what happens is, just a hypothetical, you end up doing your job and you end up doing other people's role that's in your household, right? And you get tired of it. And then what happens is the last part, you repent thee, and then you entreat for the same again. What does it mean? Like, you give your substance over, right? Or you've acted in haste too quick, right? And now it is expected of you to do all these things. Even in this instance, right? You do something, right, over habitually, you are now expected to bow down to your wife. You're now expected to bow down to your kids' emotions and stuff like that, right? And it's gonna repent you, and you're gonna want that authority back. But by the time you try to pull that authority back, your house is out of whack. Now you're getting major pushback, right? Now you're looking like the crazy one because, like, nah, you changed. You know what I'm saying? And in all actuality, you're just trying to establish order again, but it's just gonna make it harder. That's why it's giving you the advice right here to not even do it. Don't even let you get into that. And so a lot of times the guy has to be the bad guy, right? The husband, the father has to be the bad guy in these situations, just to make sure that your role, that your leadership position doesn't diminish, right? The husband has to be the bad guy. And what happens? Just like on a sports team, the head coach got to be the bad guy. You take somebody out the game, right? He think he should be in. His parents in the crowd think he should be in, right? But you took him out the game for a reason. You're the bad guy. You're the bad guy. You win the game, they still mad. You're the bad guy. You see what I'm saying? But these roles have to be established, right? The orders have to be established, right?
Right. A noun is a person, place, or thing, right? So it says, give not thy goods to another. Those goods, right, is a thing, right? I'm going somewhere with this. The goods is a thing. And this isn't talking about don't do charity, right? It's not talking about don't give. If you got some milk in your refrigerator and somebody needs some milk that it's not saying don't give the milk, because you can always get milk. There's always more cows making milk. But it's talking about something that you value. Don't give something that you value to another, because it's going to make you want it back. So this is giving you wisdom on how not to covet or envy your neighbor because of a decision you made, right? Meaning, build yourself up to the point to where when it's time for you to give charity, you can give that charity without giving up your valuable possessions. You can give somebody a valuable possession that's not yours. I say that to say this: power is a husband's, power is a man's precious thing. It's a man's goods. And once you give your kids power, right, you do it for a little bit. You could do it just one time. They're going to expect to have that power to say no or to make their own decision.
Because the power is addicting to anybody.
And so once you give that power to your wife, guess what? She's gonna
want to keep it.
yeah, a wife is not going to want to get that power back, because that comes with a level of pride for her, right? And she wants that power, right? Because who doesn't want power? So the thing is, before you be that likable husband, that practical husband, that loving husband, that simp husband, right? To make your wife feel good because she's a queen and she the prize. Before you be that husband, think about the power that God wants you to have over your house, right? And the moment you give that power away, you're gonna want it back. Trust me, you're gonna want it back, and it might be too late to come.
Right, man. And again, man, we're paralleling everything with Christ in the church, right? We don't see Christ giving his authority or his power over to people around him, right? We don't see Christ going to individuals seeking advice. You see what I'm saying? Um, uh, One example, right? We see Christ. He enters into somebody's humble abode, and a lady, she starts pouring precious ointment on him and all these oils that she could have really saved for a better occasion. Um, and people in the house are telling him, "Hey, she tripping, man. What are you doing? You doing too much." Did Christ say, "Hey, stop, you doing too much"? Right? um he understood what she was doing, and he understood that she knew her position and her role, right? And he allowed her to operate within it. A lot of times, husbands, right, we get so sympathetic and seeing our women operate in what they're supposed to be doing that we cause them to stop because it might be hard. You know what I'm saying? We cause them to stop because it might look like something else. You know what I'm saying? Think about Christ, man. You know what I'm saying? Somebody might argue that, hey, the man Christ was feeling himself. He had this girl doing this, Y, and Z, but he knew the purpose that she was doing it. He knew that her submitting that much to him was going to be the best for her. So sometimes as a husband, we see our women going through something that might be hard for them, doing a task that might be a little bit, strenuous. We might see them, and I'm not saying, not to give compassion to your wives. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, don't stop them from doing things that they are called to do, right? Even if it does seem a little difficult from time to time, right? Paralleling this back to the world, a head coach, a lot of head coaches, they don't be working out. You know what I'm saying? Last time I checked, every practice I did, I didn't see the head coach get on them lines and do suicides with us, right? He might look at us and feel bad that we dying, right? Somebody not making the time, so we got to keep doing it. He might feel bad for us, right? But he knows it's necessary. He knows it's necessary. CEOs and all of this stuff, right? They know we're behind on products, so people got to do overtime. I know y'all got to get back to y'all families, man. I know it's hard on y'all, but it's going to be better for y'all because y'all going to have a job in the morning if we're not behind, right? You know what I'm saying? And so the same thing, man. Same thing for Christ when he was with Mary Magdalene. I think that's what it was, right? He understood that what she was doing might seem grievous to some folks, but he let her operate in that because she was operating within her role to him, right? And sometimes it gets a little hazy, man, because if you're a good dude, we don't want to be, good dudes, man. It's hard to sit there and get treated like a king. It's hard to get catered to, things like that. Sometimes it kind of raises up an eye. But if that's what God had called for in the union that you're in, right? It's not really, she's not really doing it for you per se, right? She is, but she's doing it because she was called to do it, right? And likewise, women understand. We tell women all the time, like, you're not really doing that for your husband. You're doing it because the Lord called you to do it, right? And that leads into a whole nother lesson about respecting your husband and not waiting for him to be a respectable person for you to respect him. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just little things like that that go into play. Knowing your role, knowing your position, you know, knowing your position. I got one more verse in this book, right? Let's go to verse 21. I like verse 21. It's going to speak about children, but keep in mind, have the same mindset. Just for everybody in the household, right? Women and children, right?
So Sirach chapter 33 and 21. For better it is that thy children should seek to thee than that thou shouldest stand to their courtesy.
Right, man.
Their courtesy.
Better it is for your children, your wife, to seek to thee than you would be running after them. You know what I'm saying? And best believe people from the outside, they can notice which one is happening. Again, as a husband, you want to maintain that leadership. Why? Because that is your way of serving your family, being a leader, right? When you go to a job, 9 times out of 10, you can notice the worker from, the supervisor, right? But by how they're acting, how they carry themselves, what they wear, how they speak, you know what I'm saying? 9 times out of 10, you see workers coming up to them, right? Workers going to their office, inquiring about questions and stuff like that. You don't really see them going to their workers. You see what I'm saying? Same thing it should be like in your household. You shouldn't have to seek to your children to beg them to go to sleep and stuff like that, right? Your children should get to a place where they're in line and they're respecting you and what you say, right? You shouldn't have to seek to your wife and beg her to do the dishes and beg her to have a meal ready for you when you get home and stuff like that, right? Or stand at their courtesy, meaning like you racing home to go cook for your wife. And I know there's certain situations and circumstances where that might have to be the case, right? I'm just talking about in general, just generally speaking on the general family. I know certain families have to operate a little differently, especially here in America. But what I'm saying is just take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, right? You don't want to start standing at your family's courtesy when your family is there to help you, right? Think about like traditional families, even here in America back in the day, like on the farms, on the ranch and stuff like that. A man has a family. What does he do with that family? He gets a wife to take care of him and the kids, to make sure the house is kept, good food is out while he's out, doing what he got to do, right? He has these kids, not that he's running after these kids, but these kids can help him do what he has to do, right? Whether that's chores around the house with the mom or, tasks that he's handling out there on the farms, stuff like that, right? As a leader, you build this family. This is your entity. This is your team. This is your industry, your business, right? And you're the leader. As a man, you have to start acting like that and carrying yourself as such, right? But also knowing that your leadership is how you serve, and be always cognitive of how you're leading, right? You can have good we've all had good leaders and we all had bad leaders, right? I'm finally getting in a space in my life where I'm actually being a leader. And one thing I can say that helped me is I done had many leaders before. I know what a good one is versus a bad one. There is a level of compassion that needs to be shown, right? You do need to draw that line in the sand from time to time, right? A level of practicality and down to earthism, so to speak. With everything there's balance, but nonetheless, you want to make sure that it is seen from the outside that you're the leader and that you got your house in order, right? Always take a step back in every situation, every conversation that you have, right? And just ask yourself, if I was a CEO, if I was the head manager, if I was the head coach, would I be speaking like this in this conversation? Would I be carrying myself like this in this conversation? And sometimes it's kind of it's kind of hard, right? Even in the world, it's kind of hard, right? On the job side, right? On the team, on the sports team, right? Because sometimes you have employees that come and they curse you out. Sometimes you have players that come and they curse you out, right? You still have to be that leader. You still have to carry on with leadership and speak to them as a leader should, right? They're, of course, like the Bible says, right? It says, husbands, love your wives, give honor to them. They're the weaker vessel. On a sports team, your players are weaker vessels, right? In business, your employees are weaker vessels. They don't think like you, right? Um, they're they're a little bit more. Employees are more emotional than bosses, right? Typically, right? Your players are a little bit more emotional than the coaches, right? Typically, same thing in a family. Your kids are more emotional. Your wife is more emotional, right? So when you get in these conversations, when you get in these predicaments, always put your mindset back in that leadership mode. You're a leader. You're a CEO. How should you be carrying yourself, right? You don't ever want to say or do anything that you're gonna regret, right? Because usually leaders and head coaches and all that stuff, they're the ones that get sued, right? Uh, harassment charges and all of this stuff. And it's when you mess up as a leader, whether you're talking about on the job, on a sports team, whatever, or in domestically in your household, when you mess up as a leader, don't nobody care about what the lower level did. They just worry about what you did, and that's what gets highlighted, right? Let's get into some examples of what leading or serving through your leadership looks like. Um, let's go to Matthew 8:23. Got like three examples, right? All right, you can start at verse 23.
Matthew chapter 8 and verse 23. And when he has so like and when he was entered into a ship, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves, but he was asleep.
This is talking about Christ. So they enter into this ship, right? His disciples were with him, right? Um, they're in the sea, and the waves started to cover as he was asleep, right? It started to storm, and Christ was sleeping through all of this, right? Meaning, like, chaos might be going on in your life, chaos might be going on in your marriage, right? As a leader, you got to be at peace in every situation, or at least seem like you at peace. You see what I'm saying? Verse 25.
Verse 25. And his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish.
They panicking, right? A lot of times we find ourselves in situations where our families panic. They think it's worse than what it is. Same thing like on a sports team and in the job. You get people get emails and they go off the balcony, right? Because they don't know what's finna happen. What's finna happen? We finna get laid off. What's going on, right? Or we getting a new coach? What's going on? You know what I'm saying? It all they start to panic. They saying we about to perish and you over here sleeping, right? This is a very key thing, right? And a lot of people might go over some people's heads, but as employees, as players, as wives, and as children, if your leader, if your boss, if your head coach is not panicking, that's a good indicator that you probably shouldn't panic either. I'm not saying that happens 100% of the time, but that's a good indicator that if your leader is not panicking, you shouldn't be panicking either. And we're seeing this right here in real time. Verse 26.
I also want to point out too, leaders alleviate panic and responsibility. A way you can see that is a lot of people don't want to start their own business because they say, man, I don't want to have to do taxes and come up with an LLC and pay yearly for insurance and have to worry about, I don't want to worry about all that, bro. I'm just a worker, bro. They'll tell you, nah, I just work my 9 to 5 and get my check every week, because for some people that's a hassle. For some people that's a lot of work. But one thing about being under a leader, right, is they take all that stress away from you, right? They take all that panic away from you. They organize for you, right? So that's another way that leaders serve. They do the stuff that you don't want to do.
Right. They come to you with concerns, right? And a lot of times the response is, all right, I'll figure that out and get back to you. Right. Don't worry about that. I'll get back to you. Just go and do what you're supposed to do. Do your job. I'll fix that. I'll handle that. Right. And so that's how you should look at it. Verse 26.
Right. Verse 26. And he saith unto them, why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm.
Right. He's calming them down. Like, why are you fearful? Right. Keep in mind how Christ is talking to them. Right. He's saying, why are you fearful, or ye of little faith? Sometimes your leadership talk to you kind of stern. Sometimes they talk to you in a way that some people would take belittling. Some people, if they were to say something like this to their wives, right, their wives would feel belittled. You saying I have little faith? You saying I'm not fearful? I don't have little faith. There's just a storm going on outside, right? Look how he's speaking to his bride. Look how he's speaking to the church. And it's not to belittle nobody. It's to point out in you. You might not think that you have little faith. You might not think that you're fearful. But I'm letting you know right here in this instance, examine how you're acting. Examine where you are, right? Take a step back and look at yourself. Put yourself in your own shoes, right? And you will see that you are fearful, that you do have little faith. It's okay as people, we're not perfect beings. As husbands, we're not perfect beings. As wives, you're not a perfect being. So if your husband says something to you, right, it's not that he doesn't, he thinks you're he thinks you're poop. You know what I'm saying? It's not that he's trying to belittle you. It's not that he thinks that, oh, I could have found a better wife than you. That's not what he's saying. What he's trying to perfect you. He's trying to point out a flaw that you might not see, so that you can go forward and correct it.
Yeah, most of the time women already understand that, right? There's a video that's going around on social media of a lady, and she was like, me growing up in my relationship is realizing my husband is right majority of the time. I just don't like his tone, right? And a lot of times that's what the issue is. It's not that wives don't want their husbands to be right. It's not that wives don't know that their husbands are right. A lot of times they just don't like the tone of which the man is telling them. And really it's because men don't sugarcoat. They don't try to wrap it up in a present. They just say it. If it comes to their mind, they say it, right? And that's just the difference between men and women. But nonetheless, we have to take our feelings out of it, and we have to see the end goal, and we have to see examine what's actually being said or corrected.
Right. That's not again, man. And I know I don't got to say this, but it's not to say that women aren't right sometimes too, right? My wife is right about a lot of things. You know what I'm saying? But right now we're focusing on the husbands and their leadership, right? I like this passage. That's why I picked this example. Is one, because of the reason that we just explained, how he's speaking to his bride here, how he's pointing out flaws. Two is because we see that his bride the church, the disciples, they came to him, right? They came to him. They sought out him, and it wasn't the other way around. You know what I'm saying? Matter of fact, they disturbed him within his peace. A lot of times that's what happens in relationships. A man be peacefully doing whatever, whether he's taking a nap, he watching the game, right? Some of y'all play video games, right? And you know, that your child or your wife come to you with a problem out of nowhere, and it's really not a big problem at all, you know? And you kind of sit there like, I know you didn't just interrupt, you know, what I was doing for that. And you kind of talk to him like Christ is talking to him. You know what I'm saying? And Christ, his responses to a lot of things are kind of like how husbands respond to wives in a lot of things. There's an instance where Christ looked at he was having a conversation. He's like, aren't you supposed to be a master in the law and you don't know this? Think about if a husband in today's time were to say something like that to his wife. How are they going to take that? Not very well, right? And not to say that husbands shouldn't be able to convey their you know, their points across without, you know, causing offense, but just know as a man, as a leader, sometimes you know, it can come across like that. And I'm just bringing that up just to say, hey, children, wives, understand that your husband, your father, he don't mean nothing by it. He still loves you. And the reason why we know that he does, because we see Christ doing it to the church, which he loves so much that he died for, right? So don't get that stern conversation mixed up with the fact that he doesn't respect you or he doesn't love you, right? Sometimes that's just how leaders convey their points across, right? You know, women have certain hormones and they act certain ways, this, that, and the third. And people neglect to know that men operate certain ways too. Men operate within their hormones, within their feelings, within their emotions as well. Sometimes it doesn't come across as you would like, but you have to keep that in perspective and just know that at the end of the day, your husband, your father, they still love you, right? I want to go to another example. Got two more examples, right? We're going to go to Matthew 14 and 22. Right. Go ahead.
Matthew 14 and verse 22. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship to go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitude away.
All right, so him and his disciples get on a ship, another ship. Right, verse 23.
And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone.
Right.
But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea.
This is when Jesus started walking on the sea, man. Started walking on water.
And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a spirit," and they cried out for fear.
Think about it, man. Your husband come home, he say, "I'm quitting my job. I'm about to start my own thing," right? And your wife, she freaking out. She's troubled, saying, "It's a spirit on this man," and she's crying out for fear. What has gotten into this nigga? You know what I'm saying? Something's wrong with this man. What are you talking about quitting your job? Are you stupid?
Or right? Your husband is saying, "All right, we're gonna move to this town," and you're like, a town in the middle of nowhere where we don't know anybody, right? It could be a plethora of things that your husband may come in and say, right?
Right. You're buying a dog right now, right? Hold. You're finna. You know, there's examples. You know, there's examples. You know, but just know, man, we all be put in predicaments like this that might seem crazy. And you know, our kids and our wives, they might act like disciples are acting right now. Verse 27.
27, but straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid.
He's saying, hey, do you know who I am? A lot of times as husbands, we like, hey, can you respect what I'm doing? Can you give me the benefit of the doubt to think that I know what I'm talking about? Be of good cheer, it is me. Don't be afraid. Women, I know what I'm doing. I know why would I put ourselves in jeopardy, right? You know what I'm saying? It's me. Don't be afraid, right? Oh man, let me go back. Verse 28.
Verse 28. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water.
Right? Sometimes you say all this stuff, then they start, sometimes I've been in some situations where I made some decisions, and they start trying you in your decision. Okay, well, if you got it all figured out, then hey, then what about X, Y, and Z? You start getting that back talk, right? That's that unbelief. You know what I'm saying? But that unbelief can quickly turn into belief. Read verse 29.
29. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down off the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus.
All right.
But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me.
So I bring this out to say, hey, look, man, you run into situations where it might seem scary to your wife and your kids, even though you got it figured out. And then you get to a point where they jump on board and they on the same path with you. And then things start to get a little rocky, right? I thought you said we was gonna be all right. I thought you said you had this under control, right? And their face start wavering, then they start sinking. Then they start looking for ways out. They trying to tap out. They trying to look how to get out of things. Maybe you should just go ahead and apply right here. I know you said you was gonna quit your job, but maybe you should go ahead and apply right here. And you like, man, just hold on, man. Because sometimes entrepreneurship is ups and downs. And I'm just using that as an example. There's many things where you will wind you up in this predicament, right? Just trying to make it real here, right? Again, Christ in the church, husband and a man. He says, so he's crying out to save him. Sometimes you put your wife in a situation and circumstances where she thinks she needs to be saved and she don't. You know what I'm saying? Same thing with children. Verse 31.
Verse 31. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt?
And then you come through with a solution and you tell your wife and you doubt it. See, you doubted me. You thought I wasn't him, And the funny thing is, again, he goes ahead and he talks to him like, and it's not belittling, but he said, hey, you got little faith, right? But you know what it is? What the funny thing is, this happens time and time again with the disciples, right? So I want to let brothers know, like, it's going to happen time and time again with your wife. You're going to be put in these situations. The faith might seem small. The respect might seem little, right? The belief in you might seem like it's not always there. And then you're going to come through, right? Through the power of God, through his son, right? You're going to come through victorious. And it's going to happen again. You know what I'm saying? And just like Christ is like, man, you would think after I do this over and over and over again, these dudes will understand. These people will understand that, you can depend on me. Same thing as a father, as a husband. And your job is to endure. Your job is to be that leader. Your job is to still find avenues to problem solve and to troubleshoot, right? Don't ever get in a place where you in that woe is me spirit and you ain't got nobody supporting you and you ain't got nobody checking up on you. Don't ever get in that mode, right? Always have a level head. Always know who you are, right? What did Christ just say in verse 27? Read verse 27 again.
Verse 27. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer. It is I.
It is I. Always have that mindset. It is I. It is me. Not in a prideful sense, right? But if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, if you tapped in with God, if you tapped in with the Most High, right, and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, understand He got your back and that you're Him, right? This is an encouragement video for all the husbands out there, because it gets in hard. We go through hard times, right? And sometimes we don't have that support like we want to. We went to a men's night, right? And there was a brother. He was like, man, I feel like he pretty much was saying, he felt his support wasn't there. He pretty much the same was, and we was telling him, hey, look, bro, as a man, right, you got to chop that up. No one's going to check up on you. No one's going to support you, bro. You still got to operate. You still got to function. I was telling somebody else that was going through the same thing. I said, hey, bro, you better get you a dog, go buy a fishing pole, something, you know what I'm saying, to take your mind off things, to keep you level-headed, right? Don't go run into the bottle and drugs and stuff like that, but get you something that's going to keep you level-headed and know the support's not always going to be there, but you still have to function, right? Because at the end of the day, you can sink or swim, but when you come out victorious, that's when the pats on the back come. That's when your wife loving you, right? When you making that money, you know what I'm saying? She ain't giving you no problem. She ain't ragging on your neck no more. You know what I'm saying? But you gotta plow through that, right? You gotta get to the other side. You gotta always be in that mindset of like, it is I. Be not afraid. You're gonna figure the things out, right? And that comes into play with being, not slothful, not getting down on yourself, not digging, not hanging yourself, digging the ditch for your own self. You gotta be tapped in. You gotta be able to be a leader, right? CEOs, when crap hits the fan, they are up day and night trying to figure stuff out on how to take their company from the dirt, from the dust, and rise to the occasion, right? That's how you have to be as a father and as a husband. Let me see, right? I got one more example. This example isn't necessarily Christ, but it is within his bloodline. Right? We're gonna see with Solomon, how Solomon led, right? How Solomon served, better yet. Let's go to 1 Kings 3. And 16. Let's see. All right.
Verse 16. Then came there 2 women that were harlots unto the king, and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the 3rd day after that I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also, and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we 2 in the house. And this woman's child died in the night, because she overlaid it. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me, while thine handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom.
Right. So these women came to Solomon with a problem. Right. I want to point out that they came to Solomon to solve this problem. Right. Solomon, it wasn't walking around his kingdom like Batman, trying to see, walking around, stopping everybody. Hey, you got an issue that needs to be solved? Hey, you got a problem that needs to be solved? Hey, just trying to make sure, is everything okay? And I'll bring this up to say I'm not saying it's bad to do that. You can go check up on folks, right? Matter of fact, I encourage you to do so. But a lot of times what happens is, in relationships, especially in marriages, the wife gets mad at the husband because he's in his own little world and he can't read her mind and I guess read the context clues of how she's acting to know that something's wrong with her. And a lot of times the husband gets the backlash. And a lot of times what does a husband do? Right? He'd be like, hey, why don't you just tell me? You know what I'm saying? I can't read your mind, you know. So I want to bring that out again, going back to Sirach, where it says you shouldn't seek after them, right? These are your household. They should be seeking after you. These women sought out Solomon with their issue. It's okay to be vocal to your leadership, right? Whether you're your boss, you got a problem, you got an issue, something you're dealing with. It's okay. You're supposed to be vocal to your leadership. What did it look like if you missed 3 days and you just assume that your boss should have called you, right? And just known that you were sick? Nah, you getting fired for no call, no show. You got to let your boss know something. You got to talk to him. Same thing for being in sports teams. Like, you got an issue or you got plans or whatever, you need to talk to your head coach, man. You need a tutor, a math tutor. How he know that? How he I guarantee, hey, look, your head coach should know everybody's, whereabouts and how they doing in school, but I guarantee you that's the last thing on his mind, right? You're gonna have to go up to him, hey, I'm struggling in math. You think you can help me get a math tutor? But he can't read your mind. You gotta go to him. You as a leader, you're seeking your leadership out with your issues. He's not necessarily supposed to come to you to figure out what you got going on, right? And that's not a knock to anybody. That's not to disrespect anybody. And I'm not saying that the leader can't do those things. What I'm saying is don't get mad if he doesn't, because you technically are supposed to bring them problems to him, right? Leaders aren't mind readers. As much as everybody would like them to be, they're not, right? Let's see. Verse 21.
21. And when I rose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son, which I did bear.
Right.
And the other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king.
So they came to the king with their issue, right? One lady is saying that this is her kid and it's not. The other lady saying she stole my kid and replaced my kid with her dead kid, right? And they want to know what they should be able to do about this, right? And so this is what the king said, right? You start at verse 25. Well, start at verse 24. This is what the king's response was, Solomon.
And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in two and give half to the one and half to the other.
All right, so he says, divide the living child. And we know if you divide the child, it's going to kill him, right? Verse 26.
Verse 26. Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son, and she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divided.
So one lady saying, let her keep it. The other one saying, go ahead and kill it, right? Verse 27.
Verse 27. Then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof.
Solomon said, man, I know whose baby it is, because a true mother wouldn't want to kill this kid no matter what, right? A true mother would want it to live no matter who was taking care of it. Same thing like Moses. He was put in that basket, right? It was either that or death. Put it in that basket. Let somebody else raise him up, right? Because I don't want to see my child die, right? You can read verse 28, since the last verse.
And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment.
Right, man. And so the second part of this that I wanted to bring out was the fact that as a leader, you got to be able to critically think. You got to be able to problem solve and troubleshoot, right? You got to be able to think outside the box, and it's got to be thorough, whatever you choose to do. a lot of marriages are on the rocks because they're with a leader or a husband that is bad at doing this, that can't figure things out, right? And when you do that, you cause your family to err and to panic. You can't figure things out, man. You can't troubleshoot, right? You're never gonna have peace. Not at home, right? You're always gonna be stressed out because your family's gonna be stressed out. And when your family's stressed out, put that pressure on you, and it's not a place that you want to be in. So you gotta be, as a leader, you have to be good at critical thinking, right? That's all I got for today, man. Just those three examples. You got anything else? Con, man. I hope this was edifying, man. Just on my spirit to talk about this topic today, just to encourage husbands to give a little bit of perspective to the husband and also to the wife, and to just to encourage you guys, man. It's a quick exhortation. Hope this was edifying. We'll see you guys next time. Oh, Shabbat Shalom, man. For those bringing in the Sabbath this Saturday. It's time to reset. If you had a long week, if you had a good week, right? This is the cherry on top. But take a load off, hit that reset button, and rejuvenize for next week. Without that being said, we give all honor and glory to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, by way of his only begotten Son, who is an instrument of salvation for the nation, his bride. And he also said, if you're not helping to gather, you're helping to scatter, right? We're the hopeful elect. We'll see you guys next time. Shalom and peace.